Okay, I'm going to talk about trauma. I'm going to give you the definition of that. I'm going to give you the definition of trauma bonds, and I'm going to give you the definition of narcissism. So let's start with trauma. There is physical trauma and there is emotional and psychological trauma. Physical trauma is when, let's say, you break a finger and your finger needs to go to you need to go to the doctor, you need to get physical therapy so you can start using it the way it was intended to. If you don't go to the doctor, the brain is going to send signals to that hand and it's going to try to help heal all on its own. So the body will automatically try to heal all on its own. But the problem is if it doesn't get healed, if it doesn't get the attention it needs, it may heal crooked. It may not heal the way it was intended to heal. And so then you go to the doctor and they say, well, we got to break it again and start over, where you got to get physical therapy. You might need to get some sort of medication or something because it may be painful, or, you might have to get it bandaged a certain way so it can heal right. I'm comparing that to emotional and psychological trauma. When you experience something, when you were really young, even let's say you were a child and you experience something and it's overwhelming to the system, it's too much. What happens is the brain will squash that, it will repress it. And you start using defenses what we call defense mechanisms to push it down so that you don't, because you cannot process it. We're supposed to process it up and out with our feelings, that traumatic experience. If you don't get a chance to do that, then the brain is going to repress that memory and then it's going to turn into what we call trauma. Okay, I'm going to compare that wound to that physical trauma to psychological and emotional trauma. If you experience something when you're young, let's say it could be grief, the death of someone really close to you. It could be some attack of something happened and it wasn't expected and it was too much for that child. So if that child did not get to process that experience up and what I call up and out of their system, they didn't get to talk about it, they didn't get to feel their feelings, they didn't get to process it, then what the brain will do is take that experience and store it somewhere. So it will repress that experience, and that experience is stored all over the body. What you see, what you hear, what the person saw, what they heard, what they smelled, maybe what they felt, definitely what they felt. If there was some taste involved, whatever it was, aroma, hearing and everything. Did I cover everything? Anyways, the brain will take it and push it down, and then the person's like, okay, I gotta go ahead and function and let me push this down. And so only later for that later trauma triggers are formed. So what happens is things happen that remind that person of what happened a long, long time ago. Here's an example. A lady is walking down, here's an example. A woman is walking in a mall, and before you know it, she takes off running, and then she goes into the restroom, and she's curled up in a corner shivering. What happened? She saw a man in a blue shirt, and she was attacked many, many years ago. Could be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And she saw him and she was triggered. Trauma trigger was formed. And so everything in her body took her right back to that moment. And she was in fear. She knew here from her frontal cortex, and we're going to talk about that later, that she was safe and she was in the mall. But because of that stored memory all over her body, everything else said danger, danger, danger. She knows the person's in jail. She knows the person can't get to her, but that doesn't matter. This went offline and she had a traumatic reaction. So that's how trauma looks. There are we see things that remind us, and then the person is taken back just like that. no choice of their own. Trauma bond. A trauma bond is an affectional tie or an attachment between two people. When the norm in a relationship is an intermittent reward, that means ups and downs, that means roller coaster, drama, things are wonderful or things are horrible. When you live in these extremes, a very tight bond is formed, and that's very difficult to break. That intensity, when you go through negative experiences, there's a lot of activity in the brain, a lot more activity in the brain. So when you experience a negative experience, and so because that person gets you get good treatment and then bad treatment, good treatment and then bad treatment. When you're experiencing the bad treatment, you hunger for the good treatment. And there's something about that whole process that just makes you really, really attached. It's as if you feel stuck and can't get out. That's a trauma bond. And then narcissism. What is narcissism? Narcissism is on a spectrum. It's on a spectrum. It's a spectrum of behaviors that I call narcissism. Um, on one end of the spectrum, we could call it a self-centered person, the narcissistic personality disorder. That's a clinical diagnosis, narcissistic personality disorder. On the other end of this spectrum is this person that is extremely empathetic. I call it maybe even malignantly empathetic. They're very, very empathetic. They're selfless. So on one end of the spectrum, you have selfless, you have the middle, and then you have selfish, selfless and selfish. There's a range here. There's a range. There are degrees of it. And so you have the self-absorbed, self-centered, lack empathy, endless needs for approval, endless need for validation, endless needs for attention, and then the narcissist over here, we would call this is where the narcissist would be, all the way over here, closer. All there, and there are all these traits, and the more you get over here, the closer you get to narcissism. So this comparison reinforces the narcissist. Stop there. Over here on this end, this person is comparing themselves to other people. They compare their successes to other people. This person always has to compare themselves to other people. It reinforces their self-image, which is that they are superior, above. Over here, this person compares themselves to other people as well. However, they're less than. This one is up here. This one is down here. If you have a superior, if a person has a superior image of themselves, guess who tends to be around them and form very close relationships with them? It has to be someone with a more inferior image of themselves. One up and one down. That's that scale of narcissism. The more you get over here, the closer we get to narcissist. Does this remind you of your current or past relationships? I'm going to do narcissism again. Okay, narcissism. What is narcissism? Narcissism is on a spectrum. It's in degrees. So let's say over here you have a full-blown narcissist. They meet clinical criteria that a professional would diagnose narcissistic personality disorder. And over here is the extreme opposite. This person over here is selfless, full of empathy, can't say no, selfish, selfless. So this person over here is self-centered, self-absorbed. It's all about them. This person lacks empathy, endless needs for approval, endless needs for validation from other people. Therefore, I would say this is the narcissist over here. They're comparing themselves with other people. They're always comparing themselves to others. That is where their identity comes from. That's where their self-image comes from. In the mind of the narcissist, this person is superior to other people. They're always one up. They're always higher than other people. So facts don't matter. It doesn't matter what's going on in their mind. they're superior, which means this one over here is more inferior. So some people refer to this person as an empath because they're so empathetic. They're extremely empathetic. So this is an extreme end, and then there are varying degrees. So you have one up and one down. If any of this reminds you of your current or past relationships, be gentle on yourself. Take a break, and if you need to, talk to a supportive friend that'll listen to you, because there is hope.